Hey everyone, it's Mike with It's Pittsfield Tonight. I am here with Dina Lampiasi. Dina is our Ward 6 City Councilor in Pittsfield. Dina, thank you for taking the time to do this tonight.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, and this is the second time Dina's been with me. So, but Dina, for those who are, I guess, who didn't see that or aren't familiar with you, if you just want to introduce yourself as their City Councilor, what your role is in the city, and why you're running for re-election this year.
Sure. I'm Dina Lampiasi. I'm wrapping up my first term as the Ward 6 Councilor. I was elected in 2019 and inaugurated in 2020, and I'm running for re-election. And as a Ward 6 Councilor, you know, the ward councilors, we do everything from talk to residents about potholes and street signage to honestly answering questions about taxes and culverts. It's a pretty wide range that I think the general population sometimes is a bit curious about what we actually do, and it's an interesting job.
Okay, and I know this has been mentioned. It was mentioned when you ran last time. I brought it up. I'm going to say about a year or so ago. But since you've been a city councilor, you were on the licensing board a year prior to being elected.
Yes.
Okay.
A year and a half, I think it was. Yeah.
And are you still a member of the licensing board in Pittsfield?
No, I'm not. It's a 3-year term, and I served my complete 3 years. And when the time came, I think we started talking about it in early spring. I asked to not be reappointed in June, so I've been off since June. And I have to admit, I really do miss it. It was one of all the volunteer work that I've done. It was sincerely one of my most favorite experiences. It's a fun, interesting board.
Was there any particular reason you didn't want to continue with that, or was it scheduling, or?
You know, so there has been conversation about, can a licensing board member be part of the school committee or the city council? I think a lot of the conversation around that missed the legal interpretation of Mass General Law and the Pittsfield city ordinances. And it does allow for it. And I could have been reappointed. However, with all of the conversation that happened, I don't know if that's why I wasn't so interested in it, but also I volunteer a lot of my time. I have a full-time job. I'm a city councilor. I'm on the BCAC board. I serve on subcommittees for the council. I'm part of the West Side Initiative. I show up wherever else I can, you know, and there's a certain point when I think for me personally, I realized, you know, I would like to have a little bit of my time back. And this is a couple hours once a month that I can have back. And I think sometimes it's important for all of us to recognize when it's time to return to life, right? And to have a little more time for life stuff. And okay. That's one thing.
I know a lot of people weren't aware of that, and I've still heard in reference to you being on the licensing board, and I think that's why I reached out to you, because when I looked on the city website, I said, wait a minute, I don't think she's been there for a few months. So.
Yeah. So I wasn't there for the summer. I obviously haven't been there for the fall. It's a good time. Enjoyed it.
Now this year, you know, we did a video before and we discussed some of the issues. Since then, because that was a month or two ago, whenever that was, are there anything new, or are there any big issues that you're really hearing a lot about from your constituents?
So I've been doing these phone calls and reaching out to residents, and I like going door to door, but just I wanted to respect people and not have any awkward, like, what are you doing? There's a pandemic. Why are you on my doorstep? I wanted to avoid that and make sure people felt safe. So I've been doing the phone calls. And I hear a lot about North Street. Like, people are talking about it, people drive it, people don't like it. And I respect that. I do come from a place though of, I don't think a 2-lane speedway is the best way for us to have a thriving downtown. I also recognize that the system that we rolled out last October didn't work. We asked the commissioner for some updates. He rolled those out over the summer. I want to see this conversation continue. I want to see the residents, you know, I hope that they can continue to be vocal about what is frustrating them and give us time to get it right. You know, I don't think that just ripping it all up and going back to 2 lanes is the best way to go.
You know, on that, I don't know if you know this. I
Yeah.
know, did the grant specify that that had to be on North Street, or could that have been applied to, say, First Street or Center Street and Seymour, or did it have to be North Street?
My understanding is that it was, and again, I don't have the language in front of me, so if I'm misspeaking, I apologize, but my understanding is that it has to be our downtown, like it's the main throughway.
Okay.
And you know, like I lived on North Street for I think 7 years. I work on North Street. I'm there every day. I know that I feel safer walking down North Street now. I like sitting outside with people, talking to them, and it's a better experience because you don't hear the cars driving as fast as we used to. All that aside, we still have improvements to make. And I'm listening to residents, and I've had some really good conversations with people. I've had some thoughtful, not just, you know, people that are just upset, but really thoughtful conversations about, you know, I get why you guys are doing this, but what about this? Can we do it this way? Have you asked them about this? And that's where I think residents and counselors and, you know, the other decision makers at the table can really make progress for a city, is when we start to have that dialogue.
Okay, well, I think the city will continue that conversation, and I hope so, rather than, you know, I'm hearing a lot of people upset, but I hope a lot of people can come together and engage in what they would like to see.
Yeah, and I think there's promise though in knowing that what happened last October, people were not happy about, and changes happened starting in June, right? Like as soon as changes and improvements can be made, they happen. So, you know, keeping on with that, I think there's reason to think that it will get better down there.
Now, housing is definitely a big one, and affordable housing. And right now, we're seeing the country going through a hyperinflation era, which is definitely affecting things. Like I told you earlier, I almost fainted when I was in the grocery store last week. I couldn't believe the prices, how much they went up on some things. But is housing one, you know, that you're hearing in your ward, or
I've definitely
affordable
had
rentals?
No, I've had conversations about housing, and I think, you know, people are focused on housing for different reasons, right? Like it's personal to them. Sometimes it's about wanting to make sure that we have a diverse housing stock, and that means, you know, truly affordable up to all of our market rate properties being of quality. So you know that if you're buying a couple $100,000 house, especially because of inflation right now, that you don't have another couple $100,000 of investments to make in order to modernize it, right? Like there's a whole spectrum of problems that we have on our housing. But one of the areas that I would like to see the next council commit to is, you know, really pushing for future tax incentives for these larger developments to, you know, in order to pass it, for it to include affordable housing. Like we saw at the turn of the century that mixed income housing brought communities together, and it actually made communities thrive, and it improved outcomes for children and improved outcomes for families living in mixed income buildings. I think that's a model that we need to really embrace here.
I agree. I mean, that's housing, you know, we know there's a shortage on supply nationwide, but here we're
Yeah.
seeing, I've seen houses go up for sale and the next day it says pending right on the sign. So the demand is there and the supply isn't. And I think apartment rentals have always been an issue here. Because we don't have true complexes. So it's all, that's been something that I think the city has struggled with. And I think you're probably right. The idea of giving developers incentives to build these is something we definitely need to be looking into, and probably need a lot more assistance from the state, I would assume also.
And
But
it's a
that
matter,
being,
for me, it's a matter of making it a priority, right? We have to decide that that is a value and a priority for us.
yes. And another thing attached to that I'm very passionate about is homelessness, because I think they're directly connected. And that's something we've been seeing, you know, it was talked about a lot last year because of what we saw happen in some of our parks. Do you have any views or anything on that? I know we're seeing it throughout the state. We talked about earlier what's happening at Mass and Cass out in Boston. Uh,
Yeah,
do you have any views on that here locally?
I do. And I think that, you know, to assess the local situation, I don't think that it benefits us to ignore the national situation, the state and the national, right? What we are seeing here, and you and I think we might disagree on this a little bit, but the state and the national impact us. That's why we have this problem. We have this problem because there's a national opioid epidemic. We have this problem because there's a national mental health epidemic. And we are one small community in a relatively small state that's dealing with this. And we don't, finding the financial resources to deal with it the way we need to on our own has not proven to be fruitful. I really want to see state and federal players coming to the table to address this. I'm realistic personally that as a city councilor, we are limited in our ability. We can't tell a mayor what programs to build. We can't tell them how to run their administration. We can't make their priorities for them. But we can advocate, and we can say that, you know, what's happening isn't acceptable. And that's where I stand. Like, we need wraparound services. We need housing first as an option. We need for people to have, on the most fundamental level, a safe place to go to work on the problems. How we get there is always the tricky part. It's about building trust. You know, some want to go the more punitive way of just like starting to section people. I don't know if that's the best way. I want to be mindful that we're not further triggering and that we're not making the problem worse, but it really, from my perspective, comes down to like priorities and money.
Right.
And the most basic level, right? Like we need the resources, we need the clinicians, we need the places for them to go.
We need treatment for sure. We need transitional housing, but I believe we also probably need transitional employment. I mean, we need to assure that once we engage, that we can provide the proper services to put these people on a path to the life that we know they all want. We all would want.
Right.
So I
Right.
feel that's where the weak chain is. We do have like a shelter. ServiceNet provides shelter for the night, but during the day it's out at 8 a.m. and they can't come back till 4 p.m. And I feel like that's just kicking the can further down the road.
Anything worth achieving takes time. And like you see that in government. Government is slow, and that's all. I think all of our biggest criticism of government often is how slow it is, right? And when we're talking about changing people's lives and fighting things like mental health and addiction, whatever solution we come up with isn't going to change things every night. And you know, I just want to see state and federal partners help us as a community to invest the way that we need to invest.
Okay. And I guess, what are there, other than that, I guess in closing, because we did cover, for those of you that didn't see the other video, Dina and I covered a lot of other subjects in that one. But what would you say to your constituents on why they should reelect you? And again, what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they have any questions?
Sure. You know, if I'm reelected on November 2nd, like, I just want to get back to work and continue working. I think that the pandemic has been, it's hampered a lot of the work that we wanted to do. I want the opportunity to be back there with the residents again, face to face at community meetings, talking about what they need in their neighborhood, and just doing that work. For me, it's not necessarily about big campaign promises, but continuing to help the neighborhoods that I'm helping. You know, I'm helping one neighborhood that's dealing with, you know, large trucks driving through a tight little residential neighborhood. And this is quality of life for them, right? And finding a solution with the engineers. There's, you know, helping residents with mobility issues make the city easier for them to access their essential needs, right? When they're on the sidewalk and crossing crosswalks. Those are the things that we really do and that we work on. And I just want to keep doing that. So if residents would like to reach out to me, the best number is always 413-433-8654. And then email, that my campaign email is votedina@gmail.com.
Okay. And one thing I
Yeah.
forgot to mention that before you go, Dasheen Moore, who owns a business on North Street, and I've been working with him, and I believe he lives in your ward though.
Okay.
He put together this incredible program called Beat the Streets. It was a basketball tournament they put together last year. And I've been talking to him, and we're going to do a trash pickup coming up in the next few weeks, mainly to help put community together, not just
Sure.
pick up trash. And I'd like to invite you to that if I can. And I'd love to have introduce you to him also.
Yeah, I would love to be there. That sounds great.
Okay, so I'll be in touch with you for that, and we'll work out scheduling and all that. But thank you again, Dina. And everybody, don't forget to vote Tuesday, November 2nd. Make sure you participate in this election. City elections are so important. But Dina, thank you again, and I will be in touch with you very soon.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Good to talk to you.
Yes, you too. Have a good night.